buzz. As Mu Chen and his team charged toward the spirit light ocean, the massive spirit soldiers also sensed the fluctuations in spiritual energy. A resonant hum rippled through the air as countless spectral figures of spirit soldiers suddenly shot forward, launching a coordinated assault against Mu Chen and his group. Though these spirit soldiers lacked intelligence, their sensitivity to worldly spiritual energy was unparalleled. Any unusual fluctuation within their perception range would immediately trigger a frenzied attack. Mu Chen narrowed his eyes at the incoming wave of spirit soldiers. Their numbers easily reached the hundreds. The sheer force of their spiritual energy fluctuations was not to be underestimated. Attack! With a low command, dark spiritual energy erupted from Mu Chen like a rising smoke signal. He struck forward with his fist, sending out several streaks of spiritual energy lashes ablaze with black flame, which swept across the battlefield mercilessly. Any spirit soldier caught in their path shattered almost instantly. As the spirit soldiers crumbled, streams of faint crimson spirit light coalesced and were swiftly absorbed into Mu Chen's grasp. A glint of satisfaction flickered in his eyes. After all their previous efforts, they had only managed to collect a few dozen strands of spirit light. But here, in such a short time, their gains were already immense. Finding gathering points was indeed the best way to amass spirit light in the hunting ground. Moreover, Mu Chen's spiritual energy was fused with 9 nether flames, a fire capable of burning even spiritual energy itself. Against these spirit soldiers, which were purely formed of spiritual energy, the flames proved astonishingly effective. Behind him, Xun'er and the others watched Mu Chen recklessly plow through the spirit soldiers, utterly demolishing them. A look of shock surfaced in their eyes. These creatures were roughly equivalent to heaven-merging stage opponents, individually easy to handle even for them. But to crush them with such overwhelming force, like Mu Chen was doing, was simply unthinkable. They exchanged glances, then turned toward Luoli, who followed closely beside Mu Chen. She held her sword in a delicate yet firm grip. Though it remained sheathed, the sheer intensity of her sword chi shredded every spirit soldier that dared approach. Her efficiency in eliminating them was hardly any slower than Mu Chen's. Amazing! The 3 girls could only stare at each other in disbelief. Compared to these two, their own speed was laughably slow. A bitter smile formed on their lips. These 2 newcomers were simply monstrous. The once tranquil valley, resembling a vast spirit light ocean, had now been thrown into turmoil by Mu Chen's advance. But he wasn't the only one. Elsewhere, 3 teams were also charging in from different directions like tigers descending a mountain, tearing through the ranks of spirit soldiers and dividing them into separate skirmishes. Thanks to their superior numbers, their efficiency wasn't bad. However, compared to Mu Chen's 5-man team, spearheaded by him and Luoli, the difference was still evident. Everyone fought desperately to push deeper into the spirit light ocean, knowing that spirit generals lurked in its depths. Slaying just 1 spirit general would yield as much spirit light as 1,000 spirit soldiers combined. But as they ventured further in, the pressure intensified. The endless tide of spirit soldiers surged forward relentlessly, and the continuous clashes of spiritual energy rapidly drained their strength. The 3 teams, however, seemed well prepared. At the spearhead of their formations, members took turns absorbing the brunt of the spirit soldiers' attacks before rotating out to recover, ensuring a steady flow of fresh combatants. Even with such a structured approach, their clearing speed still couldn't match Mu Chen and Luoli's. However, as time passed, Mu Chen's advance unexpectedly slowed. He soon realized that the spirit soldiers had begun concentrating their attacks on his team, as if instinctively recognizing them as the greatest threat. "They're shifting the pressure onto us," Luoli remarked softly, her eyes gleaming with insight. She had noticed that the 3 teams had discreetly reduced their spirit soldier slaying speed. With their pace slowing, the creatures naturally swarmed toward the most dangerous opponents, Mu Chen's group. "Those bastards!" Xun'er and the other 2 girls fumed. They hadn't expected such underhanded tactics. Mu Chen, however, merely chuckled. They were competitors, after all. Any so-called cooperation was fragile at best. It was only natural that the others would resort to small tricks when they saw how much stronger his team was. If they want to rush ahead, let them, Chen said calmly. He wasn't in a hurry to rush toward the spirit generals deep inside, as he could sense powerful fluctuations of spiritual energy emanating from that area. Clearly, those spirit generals weren't pushovers. It was no simple task for the three teams to abandon them and seize those spirit generals for themselves. And Ran, seeing that Chen remained calm, nodded and said no more. She followed closely behind him, collecting all the spirit lights formed from the spirit soldiers Chen and Luoli had slain. While Chen and the others were drawing the most pressure, the three teams seized the opportunity and launched a sudden attack. They tore through the formidable spirit soldiers in an instant and quickly rushed deeper inside. Chen simply glanced at their retreating figures before withdrawing his gaze, showing no interest in their attempt to take the big prize for themselves. He focused instead on working together with Luoli, wiping out the spirit soldiers. As time passed, more and more spirit soldiers shattered under their strikes, transforming into streams of spirit light, each containing immense spiritual energy, which circled around them and was swiftly collected by Ran and the others. Chen, we've already collected over 800 spirit lights. As more spirit lights were gathered, the three women couldn't hide their joy. Over 800. This was an incredibly rewarding haul. Chen smiled faintly when he heard this. A quick glance around showed that the number of spirit soldiers in this area had thinned significantly. It seemed most of them had already been slaughtered by them. Boom, boom. At that moment, a tremendous surge of spiritual energy exploded from deep within the area. A visible ripple of energy spread outward, and even the ground cracked open with deep fissures. Along with the energy explosion came a series of anguished cries, followed by the violent spread of spiritual energy. It was clear that a fierce battle was taking place deep inside. Let's go deeper. Seeing this, Chen waved his hand, changed direction, and darted toward the source of the energy. From the looks of it, the three teams had already engaged in a fierce battle with the spirit generals deeper inside. Having already cleared out most of the spirit soldiers in this area, Chen and the others easily made their way through, soon reaching the scene deep within. It was a flat area, and there, the three teams were surrounded by immense spirit light. Within that light, there were 7 or 8 enormous and indistinct shadows. These figures were about 10 meters tall, several times larger than ordinary spirit soldiers, and the spiritual energy fluctuations coming from them were comparable to those of heaven transformation stage experts. The figure in the center was particularly condensed. Its spiritual energy aura had already reached the mid-heaven transformation stage. 7 early heaven transformation stage, 1 mid-heaven transformation stage. Even Chen couldn't help but narrow his eyes upon seeing this. He hadn't expected such a formidable lineup in this deep area. No wonder even the three teams were in such a difficult position. Ran and the other 2 women also noticed the terrifying power of these spirit generals, and their expressions changed slightly. Ran whispered, "What should we do?" "Wait." Chen's expression remained calm, showing no intention of making a move. Since they wanted to take the lead, let them do so. After all, dealing with 7 early heaven transformation stage and 1 mid-heaven transformation stage spirit generals wouldn't be easy for them. Letting them expend some of their strength was probably the best approach. Initially, Chen had wanted to cooperate and share the spoils, but since the others had decided to use them as bait, he had no intention of being polite anymore. The 3 teams also noticed Chen and the others' arrival, and their faces lit up with joy. However, when they saw that Chen made no move to help, their expressions turned unnatural. It was clear they understood that Chen had grown disillusioned with their previous covert actions. "Chen, didn't we agree to cooperate? Why aren't you making a move?" Chen Peng gritted his teeth, trying to press his point. The other 2 teams' members blushed slightly, but they didn't have Chen Peng's boldness. They could only grit their teeth and face the incoming spirit generals without saying much. It's obvious you wanted to ditch us and use us as bait to draw fire." Ran scolded sharply. Chen Peng gritted his teeth, but couldn't say anything further. His pride made it hard to accept that his plan had been exposed. and he was too embarrassed to ask Mu Chen for help. Mu Chen smiled faintly, still ignoring them, simply waiting for their collapse. Boom, boom. The fluctuations of spiritual energy in the arena grew more violent. The spirit generals began to unleash frenzied attacks, sweeping through the battlefield. As they did, the members of the three teams were continuously knocked away. The formation that had once been intact quickly began to crumble. Bang! A towering spirit general, whose strength had reached the mid-heaven transformation stage, charged forward like a storm of spiritual energy. He collided fiercely with Chen Peng. The ground cracked open, and Chen Peng's face turned pale as he vomited blood and was sent flying backward. Retreat! Chen Peng finally couldn't hold on any longer. He struggled to get up and shouted. Hearing his command, his team members quickly retreated, knowing that they could not handle these spirit generals. As they withdrew, the other two teams had no choice but to retreat as well. However, after escaping the range of the spirit generals' attacks, they stopped again, clearly unwilling to leave just yet. Mu Chen, we were wrong earlier, but these spirit generals are too much for you to handle alone. Only by teaming up with us can we both benefit, Chen Peng said again, though his tone was much softer now. Although the other two teams didn't speak, their intentions were clear. Mu Chen glanced at them indifferently, then smiled, though his smile lacked warmth. Who said we can't handle it? Hearing Mu Chen's lukewarm words, Chen Peng and the others froze for a moment. Then, Chen Peng couldn't help but say, there are only two of you here with the ability to deal with the spirit generals. Do you really think you can take on 7 spirit generals in the early heaven transformation stage, and 1 in the mid-heaven transformation stage? His voice carried a hint of mockery. While he had witnessed Luo Li's strength before, he clearly felt that Mu Chen and his companions couldn't possibly handle the spirit generals in front of them. Mu Chen simply shot him a glance, but didn't waste any more words. He turned his gaze toward the figures of the spirit generals deeper within the battlefield, his eyes narrowing slightly. This formation was indeed formidable. Mu Chen, do we really have to face them alone? And Ran asked in a low voice. Despite witnessing the impressive strength of Mu Chen and Luo Li on their journey here, the spirit generals in front of them still made her feel uneasy. Moreover, those guys were still eyeing them, and if they made one mistake, they would likely succumb to their greed and attack. Don't worry, Mu Chen said with a smile, then looked at Luo Li. Can you hold them off for a while? Luo Li, her crystal-clear eyes staring at Mu Chen, asked, are you going to set up a spirit array? Great minds think alike, Mu Chen said, giving her a thumbs up. Luo Li's face turned slightly red, and she glared at him in annoyance. This guy still had the nerve to joke with her at a time like this. Can you do it? Luo Li tightened her grip on the rarely unsheathed black longsword. With a graceful smile, she stepped forward, standing in front of Mu Chen, ready to block any incoming attacks. Mu Chen smiled. With Luo Li by his side, he felt at ease. He trusted her completely, even without any defenses in place. He shot a cold, warning glance at the three teams not far away, then slowly closed his eyes. His hands formed seals, and immediately, spirit seals began to form, emanating waves of spiritual energy as they gathered in his palms. Spirit seals? Is he going to set up a spirit array? The three teams were stunned when they saw the spirit seals gathering around Mu Chen. They suddenly remembered that Mu Chen was also a spirit array master. The spirit seals rapidly formed around him, and the tremendous spiritual energy fluctuations spread out. The spirit generals deep within the arena immediately sensed the fluctuations in spiritual energy. They howled, transforming into streaks of light, and charged forward with overwhelming spiritual power, tearing apart the earth as they headed straight for Mu Chen. Luo Li's glass-like eyes locked onto the incoming spirit generals. A chill slowly spread from the depths of her gaze. Her jade hand tightened around the sword hilt, not retreating an inch. Does she think she can stop so many spirit generals by herself? Chen Peng and the others were stunned upon seeing this. Their eyes narrowed, thinking that it would take at least the strength of someone at the late heaven transformation stage to intercept a mid-heaven transformation stage and 7 early heaven transformation stage spirit generals. How could this delicate-looking, stunningly beautiful young girl possibly possess such terrifying power? Whoosh! Ignoring their astonished gazes, Luo Li gripped her long sword tightly with her jade-like hand, and suddenly, she swung it down. Buzz! The bright, blinding sword beam was like the first ray of dawn tearing through the darkness, illuminating the world. With unparalleled sharpness, it struck the bodies of those spirit generals faster than lightning. Boom! The ground cracked open with a massive rift, and the spirit generals were sent flying backward by over 100 meters. Aside from the spirit general at the mid-heaven transformation stage, the rest seemed to lose a little of their vitality, as if the blow had drained some of their strength. Clearly, Luo Li's sword had taken a toll on them. How is this possible? The members of the three teams were horrified, gazing at the slender girl in dark clothes with silver-like long hair. How could her power be so formidable? Buzz! The spirit generals, unaffected by any pain, quickly charged again. But as they advanced, Luo Li merely waved her sword. Blades of sword light shot out, forming a protective shield of sword beams. No matter how hard they tried to break through, they could not tear it apart. While Luo Li held off the spirit generals, Mu Chen's body was surrounded by over 100 spirit seals. He flicked his fingers, and those seals shot upward, merging into the sky above. Waves of spiritual energy rippled outward as streams of spiritual light interwove and connected, forming an extremely complex array of light that left anyone unfamiliar with spirit arrays dizzy. As the light spread, it took the form of a massive black lotus, and a fierce spiritual energy fluctuation spread across the sky. Is this the spirit array that once blocked Li Xuantong's attack? And Ran and the others, witnessing the enormous black lotus spirit array, immediately recognized it. They had been present when Mu Chen made his 3 moves pact with Li Xuantong and saw Mu Chen use this array against him. Boom! Boom! The spirit general seemed to sense the immense power emanating from the spirit array in the sky and intensified their attacks, pushing Luo Li's sword light shield back step by step. Luo Li's clear eyes remained calm, and she watched the spirit generals closing in. Her jade hand slowly tightened around her sword, her long fingers gently pulling the sword from its sheath, revealing a sharp, cold gleam beneath it. That's enough. Just as she was about to take action, Mu Chen's voice suddenly rang out from behind. Luo Li smiled faintly, her fingers loosening their grip on the sword. Mu Chen slowly rose into the air, gazing down at the increasingly agitated spirit generals. He suddenly changed his hand seal, and his voice echoed, "Demonic Lotus Slaughter Array." Boom! Boom! As his voice fell, the massive Black Lotus Spirit Array began to spin, sending waves of spiritual energy rippling through the air, distorting even the atmosphere itself. Whoosh! The 8 spirit generals immediately surged forward, charging directly at the array. Though they lacked intelligence, they could still sense the immense threat posed by the array. Mu Chen watched the charging spirit generals indifferently. With a casual flick of his fingers, the Black Lotus blossomed, and terrifying spiritual energy gathered at its core. Whoosh! When the energy reached its peak, a jet-black beam of light erupted from the lotus heart, shooting like a pillar of darkness through the sky, striking the 8 charging spirit generals with a force that shook the earth. Boom! The black beam slammed into the ground, causing the entire mountain range to tremble. The earth split apart, and deep rifts began to spread out from the valley. The members of the 3 teams were so shocked by the explosion that their faces turned pale. They quickly steadied themselves and cast their eyes toward the center of the explosion. There, a massive, bottomless pit, about 100 meters wide, had formed. Above the deep cave, the 8 original spirit generals had been reduced to only one light shadow floating in midair. The remaining 7, all at the early heaven transformation stage, were directly struck down and transformed into 7 deep red, flame-like, brilliant light orbs, now suspended in midair. These were the spirit lights transformed by the spirit generals. Gazing at the 7 flame-like light orbs, the members of the 3 teams immediately felt their eyes redden. The spiritual energy contained in these 7 orbs was likely stronger than all the spirit soldiers here combined. Hoo-hoo! Their breaths quickened, and they instinctively took a step forward. But just as they did, a cold gaze shot toward them, snapping them back to their senses. In midair, Chen stared expressionlessly at the three teams, his hand clenched into a fist, and over 100 spirit seals appeared around him. With his current strength, setting up a fourth-grade spirit array was no longer difficult. If these guys didn't know how to behave, he wouldn't mind giving them a harsh lesson. The three teams hesitated as they gazed at the spirit seals surrounding Chen. Finally, they withdrew their steps. They simply didn't have the confidence to withstand the powerful spirit array Chen had used earlier. Moreover, there was a young girl who had easily stopped the 8 spirit generals. They exchanged looks, and the bitterness in their eyes was clear. If they had known Chen and his team's power was this terrifying, they would have cooperated with them, at least to share in the spoils. But now, having provoked Chen's disdain, they clearly wouldn't gain anything. Chen gave them a cold glance before looking toward the last remaining light shadow. This spirit general was at the mid-heaven transformation stage and had withstood the previous attack. However, it was evident that it had suffered severe damage. Buzz. The dim spirit general floated in midair, and suddenly, a buzzing sound erupted from within it. The surrounding 7 flame-like light orbs shot toward its body. It was absorbing the spirit lights. Boom. As the 7 spirit lights entered its body, a violent burst of spiritual energy surged outward. The shockwave sent boulders within a 1,000-meter radius flying apart, turning them into dust. Its strength is rising. And Ran gasped in shock. The spirit general, having absorbed the 7 spirit lights, was rapidly approaching the late heaven transformation stage. Chen's face shifted slightly at this sudden change. Just as he was about to step forward, Luoli, standing ahead, moved first. The young girl's delicate body traced a graceful arc in the air. Her jade hand grasped the hilt of her sword, the other gripping the cold scabbard, and then she swiftly unsheathed her blade. Buzz. A terrifying sword cry rang through the air, and everyone could feel a dreadful sword light tearing through the sky. Boom. In the distance, a mountain peak collapsed, its sliding surface smooth as a mirror. Clang. Luoli appeared behind the spirit general, her long sword quietly returning to its sheath with a crisp sound. The once powerful spirit general, whose strength had surged, suddenly exploded. 8 brilliant light orbs shot out. Luoli waved her hand, and the 8 glowing orbs fell into her grasp, looking like flickering deep red flames. With a single strike, she instantly killed the spirit general, who had been about to break into the late heaven transformation stage. Above the sky, the earth-shattering sword energy quietly dissipated. However, the smooth, mirror-like surface left behind by the shattered mountain peak still remained, a testament to the terrifying power of the sword that had struck like a shooting star. Not just the 3 teams and Ran, but even Chen couldn't help but look up in slight astonishment at the black-robed girl in midair. The force of that sword was so fast, it happened almost instantaneously. Many hadn't even seen what had truly happened. The spirit general, who had absorbed the 7 spirit lights and was on the brink of reaching the late heaven transformation stage, was already slain. That sword was incredibly frightening. Chen silently marveled. Luoli truly deserved her title as the most extraordinary genius of the Luo god clan in 1,000 years. No wonder the Luo Tian god had entrusted such a heavy responsibility to her. The 3 teams stood still, speechless, their faces pale. There was fear in their gazes as they looked at Luoli, the young girl who had always stood beside Chen, stunning everyone. If before, they had been tempted by the spirit light of those spirit generals, now they dared not entertain the thought any longer. Chen and Luoli alone were more than enough to crush them. Exchanging glances, they let out bitter smiles before retreating quietly. Staying here would only bring them trouble. Leaving as soon as possible was the wiser choice. Chen cast a brief glance at their departing figures, but paid them no further attention. Luoli descended from midair and handed over the 8 orbs of spirit light floating above her delicate palm, smiling. These 8 spirit lights are worth all the spirit soldiers here combined. Chen took one. It was deep crimson, its radiance pulsing like real flames. A powerful and pure fluctuation of spiritual energy rippled from within. Compared to the spirit lights of the spirit soldiers they had encountered earlier, this was far superior, especially the one refined from the mid-heaven transformation stage, Spirit General. Within its deep crimson glow, a faint trace of purple shimmered, giving the spirit light a slightly moist texture, proof of its incredibly concentrated spiritual energy. This gathering point's greatest treasure was undoubtedly these 8 spirit lights. Satisfaction flickered in Mu Chen's eyes. This trip had been well worth it. Their haul from this gathering point was significant. These 8 spirit lights from the spirit generals, let's divide them as well. Mu Chen turned to Xun'er and her companions, taking out 3 of them and offering them to the trio. The 3 girls stared at the blazing spirit lights, their slender necks swallowing lightly. In the end, Xun'er shook her head gently. We were merely guides along the way and didn't contribute much. We shouldn't take the spirit lights of the spirit generals. But if you don't mind, could we take half of the 800 spirit lights instead? Though they desired the spirit general's spirit lights, they were not greedy. Mu Chen and Luoli had done the bulk of the work. Taking the spirit general's spirit lights would be overstepping. Seeing Xun'er's resolute expression, Mu Chen pondered for a moment before putting the spirit lights away. Then you 3 can split the 800 spirit lights among yourselves. Don't refuse this time. We're unfamiliar with the spiritual light realm, and we'll still need your guidance ahead. Xun'er hesitated briefly but eventually accepted. Though 800 spirit lights were valuable, they were still a notch below the spirit lights of the spirit generals. The 2 girls beside Xun'er showed faint excitement, clearly not expecting Mu Chen to be so generous. Let's go. There's no reason to stay here any longer. Mu Chen smiled. Only a few scattered spirit soldiers remained in the area, but he no longer had any interest in dealing with them. The 8 spirit lights they had obtained were equivalent to slaying thousands of ordinary spirit soldiers. Xun'er and the others nodded. Mu Chen waved his hand and led Luoli out of the mountain range. However, his pace soon slowed, and he landed atop a slope, frowning at the scene ahead. The mountain range's exit. There, dozens of people lay sprawled on the ground, wailing in misery. Their faces were bruised and swollen, and even the 3 team captains, Chen Peng and the others, were in a pitiful state, lying battered on the ground, their expressions dark as they glared ahead with gritted teeth. A massive boulder sat in the distance, atop which one person lounged while 2 others stood lazily nearby, their thunder glaives resting on their shoulders as they looked down at Chen Peng and his group with amused smiles. As Mu Chen's group arrived, the 3 figures turned their gaze toward them. The 2 standing figures had eyes filled with mischief, while the one seated cross-legged had his eyes half closed in contemplation. Mu Chen's expression remained calm as he observed the scene. It's the 3 Saber Monarchs. Xun'er and her companions paled at the sight of the man carrying the massive thunder glaive. The 3 Saber Monarchs? Mu Chen was slightly taken aback. He had never heard of this name in Northern Heaven's Spiritual Academy. They're the Wang family's 3 brothers, Wang Tong, Wang Lei, and Wang Zhong. Because of their mastery of saber techniques, they're known as the 3 Saber Monarchs. Xun'er's expression grew serious as she lowered her voice. They once challenged Li Xintong but were defeated. After that, they vanished for a time. Rumor has it they've been training in the Thunder Domain, preparing for a comeback. Have you challenged Li Xintong? Mu Chen asked with a hint of surprise. It seemed these 3 were quite confident in their strength. Otherwise, how would they dare challenge Li Xintong? These 3 are brothers, and they work together with incredible coordination. No matter who their opponent is, they always fight as a team, so they're very difficult to deal with. We should avoid getting into conflict with them, Xun'er said with some concern. After nearly a year of intense training, their strength must have grown significantly. If they clashed with them, it would surely be a troublesome matter. What's worrying is that they might be coming after us, Mu Chen replied with a smile. He didn't want to start trouble, but some problems have a way of finding you. It was clear the 3 in front of him weren't here for a friendly chat. Trying to avoid them might not be so easy. Heh, finally come out, huh? While Mu Chen and Xun'er were talking, a young man with dark skin standing on a giant rock grinned at Mu Chen, flashing a row of sharp teeth. With a flick of his arm, His massive crescent blade sliced the ground open with a sharp gleam. His eyes locked onto Mu Chun, and he laughed. "We've been waiting for you for a long time." And Rand's face turned slightly ugly. These guys were definitely targeting them. Is there a problem? Mu Chun furrowed his brow and asked. "Heh, nothing much. It's just that this gathering point is a spot the three of us have set our eyes on. You two getting here first isn't very polite," the dark-skinned young man said with a grin. Pointing his crescent blade at the ragged figures on the ground, he added, "How about you hand over all the spirit light you've collected? Heh, if you're not happy about that, I think these unlucky guys will help change your mind." Mu Chun stared at the dark-skinned youth. Then after a long pause, he simply shook his head without a word and walked forward. Luo Li gave a small smile and followed closely behind, while Ran and the other two women kept their faces wary, circulating their spiritual energy, ready for any sudden moves. "Heh, interesting," the dark-skinned youth remarked, momentarily stunned, then burst out laughing. He watched Mu Chun approach and sighed. "Seems like we've been in seclusion for too long. We've lost all our intimidation." Though he was laughing, there was a hint of coldness in his smile. Whoosh! The crescent blade was slightly raised, its edge glowing with a cold gleam. A sharp aura ran along the blade. In the next moment, the dark-skinned youth's gaze turned icy, and with a fierce shake of his arm, he swung the blade violently. Boom! The earth in front of them was torn apart by the blade's ruthless aura, and a visible, fierce beam of light shot toward Mu Chun like lightning. The blade's light expanded rapidly in Mu Chun's eyes. He stomped his foot hard, and a surge of dark flame, spiritual energy erupted from within him, sweeping out like a lash and colliding violently with the blade's aura. Bang! As the ground cracked, black flames soared, and the blade's violent aura was blocked. "Wang Tong, what do you think you're doing?" And Ran shouted angrily when she saw the opponent finally strike. The young man seated on the giant rock slowly raised his head. His gaze fixed on Mu Chun's figure, and he smiled faintly, as expected of someone who could take on Li Xuantong's 3 moves. It seemed he had heard of Mu Chun. "We don't want to fight you. If you don't want to hand over your spirit light, that's fine. We won't make things difficult for you." Wang Tong, the eldest brother, then turned his gaze toward Luo Li and extended a finger, pointing at her. "But you'll have to hand her over to us. Don't worry, we won't harm her. It's just that we've heard Li Xuantong has an interest in her, so we need to use her to deal with him." And Ran and the others' expressions changed immediately. But then they saw Mu Chun's expression darken, and a chilling, heart-stopping coldness slowly spread from him. Looking at the silent Mu Chun, who seemed to radiate an eerie aura, the women understood that this was no longer the calm young man they had seen before. He was angry, truly angry. A dragon has its reverse scales. Touch them, and it will roar. Clearly, the Wang family's 3 brothers had touched something Mu Chun could not tolerate. The 3 Wang brothers on the giant rock looked at Mu Chun's increasingly grim face, their eyes narrowing slightly. The figure sitting cross-legged on the rock was clearly the eldest, Wang Tong. He furrowed his brow and gazed at Mu Chun, whose gaze had suddenly turned cold and fierce after Wang's remark. He hadn't expected such a reaction from the latter. "No wonder you've always been inferior to Li Xuantong." Mu Chun lifted his head, staring at the 3 of them with little emotion. A smirk, sharp and hostile, spread across his face. "You have ambition, but no strength. Perhaps Li Xuantong wouldn't even consider you worthy opponents." At these words, the 3 brothers, Wang Tong included, looked grim. Veins bulged on their hands, their eyes locking on Mu Chun with icy malice. Those words had torn open the wounds they carried deep inside. Years ago, when they had first arrived at the Northern Azure Spiritual Academy, their hearts had been full of pride and a refusal to accept mediocrity. They had banded together to challenge the then-celebrated Li Xuantong. The result, however, was a humiliating defeat. Back then, Li Xuantong hadn't even displayed the air of a winner. He had merely glanced at them coldly before walking away. That indifferent look had deeply struck the 3 brothers. From that moment on, they had become more humble, devoting themselves to hard training. Now, their strength had grown immensely, and they even had the ability to compete for a spot in the heavenly rankings top 10. They believed that, should they meet Li Xiantong again, they would be able to wash away their shame. Are you looking for death? Wang Lei, the darkest of the three, had the fiercest temper. He glared at Mu Chun, his voice harsh. A mere freshman at the quasi-spirit transformation stage dares to speak so boldly in front of us three brothers. It seems that having taken 3 moves from Li Xiantong has given you far too much false confidence. Wang Zhong sneered, mocking him. It seems my words really struck a nerve. Wang Tong's expression remained cold as his eyes narrowed. But now that the words are out, you must pay the price for them. I hope you can afford it. Boom. Before his voice even finished echoing, Wang Lei, the most impatient of the three, let out a sinister laugh. His hand tightened around the sharp, unmatched thunder glaive, stepping forward. An explosive wave of spiritual power surged from him. Mid-heaven transformation stage. And Ran and the others' expressions immediately changed. No wonder the Wang brothers were so arrogant. They had reached such a level of power. The combined power of 3 mid-heaven transformation stage cultivators, along with their synchronized cooperation, was enough to challenge even late-stage heaven transformation experts. It was no wonder they had returned to cause trouble for Li Xiantong. Boy, if you hand over Ling Guang and her, you'll be fine. But since you're so ungrateful, don't blame me for being ruthless. Wang Lei, holding the thunder glaive, moved in an instant, like a bolt of lightning, appearing above Mu Chun. With both hands gripping the glaive's handle, he shouted, and a brilliant bolt of lightning erupted from the blade, accompanied by a deep thunderclap. Thunderclap slash. With a fierce cry, a domineering lightning blade shot down at Mu Chun, engulfing him in a storm of violent lightning that extended out over several meters. Mu Chun looked up, his black eyes reflecting the blinding radiance of the lightning. Boom. The lightning blade slammed into the ground where Mu Chun stood. The earth trembled, and cracks spread out in all directions like a spider's web. Mu Chun and Ran and the others screamed in alarm as they saw him struck by the blade. Luoli, however, calmly observed the scene, her eyes clear and unpanicked. She, too, gripped the hilt of her sword, her eyes, like glass, locked coldly on Wang Tong and his brother. Pathetic. I really don't know how you managed to take 3 moves from Li Xiantong. Wang Lei stood arrogantly in midair, his thunder glaive in hand, looking down at the smoke-filled area below. He couldn't help but sneer. This kid couldn't even dodge a single strike from him. He wondered what gave him the courage to act tough in front of them. Oh, really? A faint, chilling laugh suddenly echoed from behind Wang Lei. His expression changed instantly, and his hand raised the thunder glaive almost reflexively, slashing it behind him. Dark spiritual power, burning with black flames, surged forward like rising smoke, crackling with extreme heat as it collided directly with the blade's energy. The clash of metal echoed as sparks flew. Wang Lei's grip on the thunder glaive trembled slightly. The blade, once shrouded in radiant lightning, dulled under the relentless assault of the eerie black spiritual energy. Bang! Bang! Before he could even process his shock, a shadowy figure darted toward him like a phantom. Cloaked entirely in that ominous dark energy, fists, elbows, and legs moved in perfect harmony, transforming the entire body into a relentless war machine. The attacks surged like tidal waves, crashing down on him with overwhelming force. The sudden, ferocious onslaught left Wang Lei flustered. His defenses faltered, becoming increasingly desperate. Each blow that connected sent searing, violent spiritual energy surging into his body, wreaking havoc within his meridians and muscles, leaving him racked with sharp pain. Below, Ran and her 2 companions, along with members of the 3 teams who had been previously subdued by the Royal Triad, stared wide-eyed at the sky. In just moments, the once smug Wang Lei had been thoroughly overpowered. In this head-on clash, Mu Chun, whose strength was only at the quasi-spirit transformation stage, had managed to completely suppress Wang Lei, who was at the mid-heaven transformation stage. Boom! High above, a black arc of light collided violently with the lightning-wreathed figure, sending ripples of spiritual energy through the air. Wang Lei's figure, surrounded by flickering thunder, was blasted backward, tumbling through the sky. As the lightning dimmed, his face emerged, etched with disbelief. With the formidable spiritual energy of the mid-heaven transformation stage, how could he lose in a direct confrontation with Chen, who hadn't even fully reached that level? Swish! Before Wang Lei could snap out of his daze, that phantom-like figure reappeared overhead. A powerful punch descended, black spiritual energy erupting like a volcano, bringing with it the force to shatter mountains. Clang! In a panic, Wang Lei raised his thunder glaive to block, but an overwhelming, searing energy surged through, corroding the blade's glow almost instantly. Engulfed by the spiritual force, Wang Lei's body became a blur, crashing down like a meteor. The ground trembled on impact, dust billowed, and the earth split open, revealing a massive crater. At its center, Wang Lei lay sprawled, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. He finally coughed up a mouthful of blood, eyes filled with disbelief. "Now do you understand how I withstood Li Xuantong's 3 moves?" came a cold, emotionless voice from ahead. Wang Lei raised his head to see Chen standing nearby, his body faintly shimmering with silver light, those dark eyes sharp as blades. Wang Lei's expression shifted as he hurriedly retreated. Swish! But Chen wasn't about to let him go that easily. With a single stride, his movement echoed like a dragon's roar, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of Wang Lei. "You dare!" Wang Tong and Wang Zhong shouted sharply upon seeing Chen's unrelenting pursuit. Just as they were about to intervene, a clear sword hum cut through the air. A razor-sharp sword chi locked onto them, subtle yet suffocating. That sword chi was unparalleled in its sharpness, forcing both their expressions to darken. They turned their heads to see Luo Li standing not far away, her serene eyes fixed on them. The black sword in her jade-like hand was halfway out of its sheath, releasing that terrifying sword chi. Realization dawned on the Wang brothers. The young man and woman before them weren't as easy to deal with as they had assumed. Boom! A muffled thud echoed from ahead as another figure was blasted backward, slamming into a giant boulder at their feet, shattering it into pieces. Wang Lei coughed up more blood, his eyes finally tinged with fear as he stared at the youth slowly approaching. They had picked the wrong fight this time. They had never underestimated Chen, but they hadn't expected this freshman to be such a formidable opponent. If that's all you've got, you'd better not embarrass yourselves by looking for Li Xuantong. Chen's indifferent gaze swept over the royal triad, his eyes slightly lowered. It's time to get serious. Wang Tong's gaze darkened slightly. He clenched his palm, and a crescent moon glaive appeared in his hand. He slammed the hilt heavily into the ground, and the blade's radiance shot skyward, tearing apart the clouds above. What an arrogant tone. I'll admit I misjudged the situation, but as for getting my 3 brothers to surrender, you're not qualified for that yet. Wang Tong's eyes were cold and fierce. He stepped forward, and the massive blade radiance became even more violent, shredding the very earth beneath them. Today, I'll see just what price you'll make us 3 brothers pay. This was originally prepared for Li Xuantong, but I'll use it to welcome you instead. Let's see if you can endure what's coming. He gripped the crescent moon glaive tightly. Behind him, Wang Lei and Wang Zhong's expressions were equally vicious. The 3 of them held their large blades, their domineering aura spreading with the gleaming edge of their swords, accompanied by the faint sound of rumbling thunder echoing through the heavens and earth. Boom! Outside the mountain pass, the sky seemed to gather with dark storm clouds, and low thunder reverberated through the air. The violent blade radiance soared into the sky, merging with the thunder in a magnificent spectacle. Although the Wang brothers didn't have particularly prominent reputations in Northern Song's spiritual academy, their strength was unquestionable. Their earlier challenge to Li Xuantong had been enough to prove their abilities. Would anyone without any backing dare to do something so reckless? That would be courting humiliation. Now, after a year of seclusion and intense training, their strength had greatly advanced. They were now far beyond where they were a year ago, giving them the confidence to challenge Li Xuantong once again. If they could defeat Li Xuantong, they would rise to become the most unexpected contenders and gain fame in the Northern Song Spiritual Academy. Their long period of hiding would finally be worth something. But now, Instead of facing Li Xiantong, they had encountered the equally troublesome Mu Chen. If they couldn't even defeat him, how could they expect to challenge Li Xiantong? Therefore, they had to act decisively and crush him completely. They would make it clear to everyone that those who dared challenge the Wang brothers would only meet one fate: utter defeat. Coldness surged in the eyes of the Wang brothers. The three of them gripped their crescent moon glaives, each blade crackling with lightning, radiating a fierce, thunderous power. At this moment, it felt as though they had become one with the thunderclouds above. And Ran and the others couldn't help but change their expressions upon seeing the intimidating display of the Wang brothers. And Ran angrily exclaimed, "Wang Tong, do you have no shame? You need 3 people to deal with a freshman?" Wang Tong's face remained indifferent as he replied, "The habit of my 3 brothers is well known to everyone. Whether we face a strong or weak opponent, we always fight together." "You." And Ran gritted her silver teeth in frustration. Wang Tong's gaze turned cold as he looked at Mu Chen, slowly speaking, "If you agree to our terms, I'll overlook your previous reckless words." Mu Chen stared at Wang Tong, the corner of his mouth lifting in a slight smile as he stepped forward and said softly, "Actually, I wanted to say the same thing to you. One should know their own limitations." Heh. Wang Tong finally laughed in fury, his eyes growing colder. He no longer wasted words, his spiritual power surging as the 3 of them worked in unison. The combined force felt like it was concentrating, a terrifying aura of spiritual pressure emanating and enveloping Mu Chen. Luo Li softly asked, "Should I help?" "Cover my back," Mu Chen smiled. If the opponent were truly formidable, he wouldn't hesitate to accept Luo Li's help. But clearly, the Wang brothers had yet to reach the point where they could force Mu Chen to that level. Luo Li smiled gently, not insisting. She knew Mu Chen was always calm and rational. If he chose to act, it meant he had some confidence. Luo Li took a gentle step back, leaving the battlefield. The 3 girls, and Ran and the others, hurriedly gathered around, their faces full of concern. "Is it really all right to leave Mu Chen to handle this alone?" "Don't worry," and Ran, Luo Li reassured with a smile, her eyes fixed on Mu Chen's calm, yet reassuring figure. Even in Ran and the others couldn't help but stare, a hint of admiration in their eyes. They couldn't help but sigh inwardly. No wonder even someone as extraordinary as Li Xiantong had fallen for him. Luo Li's heart clearly had a place to rest, and it seemed that Li Xiantong's hopes were bound to be in vain. Boom! A powerful surge of spiritual energy erupted from Wang Tong and his 2 brothers, sweeping through the area. The massive boulders scattered across the ground shattered into fine dust under the force. The thunder glaives in their hands crackled with an increasingly intense surge of lightning. Above, the sky roiled with thunderclouds. A sudden burst of lightning illuminated the entire region. Dong! The moment the lightning split the sky, Wang Tong and his brothers' gazes sharpened, turning as fierce as wild beasts. With a low growl, the 3 of them launched forward in unison, their movements forming a semicircle as they charged toward Mu Chen. Their bodies were shrouded in lightning, their speed astonishing. From a distance, they appeared like 3 streaks of lightning slashing through the air, their rapid movements generating deep, rumbling sonic booms. Thunderblade. With a thunderous roar, the 3 of them raised their glaives and slashed downward in unison. The ground split apart, cracks spreading as 3 crescent-shaped arcs of lightning slashed mercilessly toward Mu Chen. The attacks were precise and ruthless, sealing off most of Mu Chen's escape routes, forcing him into a head-on confrontation. Mu Chen's dark eyes flickered coldly as he watched the 3 bolts of lightning closing in on him. In a flash, his figure moved, spiritual light surging around him. His silhouette transformed into the image of a soaring dragon. Resounding dragons were echoing through the air. Swish! The moment the dragon's roar rang out, the 3 lightning-infused glaive strikes viciously crashed down on Mu Chen's previous position. The ground exploded upon impact, but Mu Chen's figure had already vanished without a trace. So fast! Wang Tong and his brother's eyes narrowed. They had already witnessed Mu Chen's speed when he had toyed with Wang Lei earlier. To the left. Wang Tong's gaze sharpened as he barked a command. The moment he spoke, the three brothers displayed remarkable coordination. Without hesitation, they swung their lightning-charged glaives toward the left in unison. Boom! The ground was torn apart once more, but the shadow that had just been there dissipated like a mirage. Even their thunderous assault failed to land a hit on Mu Chen. Careful. He wants to pick us off one by one. Wang Tong's voice was grim as he finally grasped Mu Chen's strategy. The three of them relied on their flawless teamwork, but if one of them was taken down, their coordination would crumble. Among the three, Wang Zhong was the weakest. Given that Mu Chen had appeared on the left earlier, it was clear that he was targeting Wang Zhong first. Swish. However, just as Wang Tong finished speaking, his pupils suddenly shrank. A ghostly shadow had appeared on his right side instead. He's coming for me? Wang Tong's expression darkened. Of the three, he was the strongest, yet Mu Chen had chosen to attack him head-on. What a fool. Boom. As Mu Chen's ghostly figure emerged, Wang Lei and the other brother wasted no time. Their glaives slashed down, their deadly arcs of lightning cutting toward Mu Chen at lightning speed. Clang! Just as the blade auras neared Mu Chen, a surge of black light erupted from within his body. In an instant, the light condensed into a towering black pagoda, its shimmering radiance dispersing the lethal strikes, neutralizing them completely. Thunder Python Saber Art. Wang Tong's gaze turned icy as he let out a furious roar. The thunder glaive in his grip flared with dazzling lightning, transforming into a colossal thunder python that screeched as it lunged toward Mu Chen. Break! Mu Chen sneered. Facing Wang Tong's ferocious assault, he did not retreat. Instead, his hands wove intricate seals before striking out with overwhelming force. A torrent of spiritual energy surged forth, manifesting behind him as a vast constellation. Within the starry expanse, an enormous white tiger materialized, stepping upon the cosmos. With a deafening roar, it tore through the void, carrying an unparalleled aura of slaughter as it clashed against the oncoming thunder python. At Mu Chen's current level, summoning the white tiger divine seal was effortless, executed with flawless precision. Boom! The white tiger roared, its fangs sinking viciously into the thunder python. An immense wave of slaughter energy surged forth, and in the next instant, the lightning-infused python was torn apart. Wang Tong's expression finally changed. His attack, which even opponents at the mid-heaven transformation stage dared not take head-on, had been utterly destroyed by Mu Chen. This guy has mastered a divine art? His eyes darkened with shock. The white tiger tore through the Lei Meng, its momentum unabated as it carried the aura of slaughter toward Wang Tong. The powerful impact struck the gleaming thunder glaive, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. Wang Tong's feet scraped the ground as he was forcibly pushed back several hundred meters, with towering ancient trees being shattered along the way. Big brother! Wang Lei and the others, witnessing Wang Tong being forced back by Mu Chen in a direct confrontation, were both shocked and changed expression. Impressive. And Ran and the members of the three teams were visibly astonished, while Chen Peng and the others were even more stunned. To be able to hold his ground against three opponents and even force the strongest, Wang Tong, to retreat. It was a frightening display of power. Boom! Wang Tong stomped his foot heavily on the ground, causing the earth to crack. He managed to stabilize his body, but blood seeped from his palm, still gripping the thunder glaive. His eyes glinted with a chilling coldness. Don't think you're the only one who has practiced divine arts. With thunder crackling in his eyes, Wang Tong stomped once more, launching his body into the air. Brilliant lightning-infused spiritual energy burst from his body and connected with a thundercloud high above. Whoosh! Seeing this, Wang Lei and the others followed suit, shooting into the sky. They fully channeled their spiritual power, releasing their own lightning that connected with another thundercloud. Thunder rumbled through the skies, and the heavens darkened as fierce winds and thunderclaps filled the air. Clearly, Wang Tong and his two companions were now forced to reveal their true trump cards. Mu Chen, if you can block this, my three brothers will voluntarily surrender. Wang Tong's face gleamed with a fierce light under the illumination of the lightning, and he coldly shouted. Suddenly, The thunder clouds above split apart, and a massive thunderbolt descended, striking the blade of his weapon. In the other two directions, Wang Lei and the others were like thunder beasts, their bodies radiating with crackling lightning. With a single step forward, the three of them seemed to make the very heavens tremble, as though invoking the wrath of a thunder god. Their dazzling thunderblades formed massive arcs of lightning, several 100 feet long, and sliced through the air with terrifying might, aiming directly at Mu Chen below. Simultaneously, their roaring battle cry echoed across the skies, like the booming of thunder.